Hello again and welcome. In our last video, we started building our tech blog, allowing users to enter in code snippets with syntax highlighting, as you can see here. A couple small changes that I made real quick. I was supporting JavaScript and now I'm supporting JSX instead because that makes it a little bit easier for me. I also added a visual separator between these snippets. It's just a simple HR tag. And finally, I actually seeded this data in a simple JSON object so that I don't have to keep on pasting this in every time we reload. So you can see on the bottom left, I'm just exporting a little JSON structure, and I'm importing it here to use as my initial values. What I want to do now is support multiple languages for my snippet block. I'm going to have a drop-down that allows us to change the language, and after that's done, I'm going to add support for Markdown blocks. So in order to change languages, obviously we need support for the languages. We need to import the modes from CodeMirror. So here I have 3 that we'll use in our dropdown: JSX, JavaScript, and Ruby. So a simple select with a value using the language prop. And we'll have to give it an onChange handler too, which we'll define in just a minute, but this is what we'll call it. Now I need my options for the different language modes. So we'll do one for JSX, one for JavaScript, and we'll do a Ruby. There we go. And we also have to define our change language function. That will take an event as an argument. And similar to the other change handler, we will call the onChange event of a redux-form field. And we'll have to supply e.target.value. Now, if I change this to Ruby, you can see that the colors change because it thinks I'm in Ruby now. It no longer recognizes this as valid. So, if I type in Ruby, on the other hand, it works just fine. However, there is one problem that you'll notice. This top one doesn't work. And real quick, I'm going to show you why. And this is the sort of thing that can happen when you're dealing with a lot of open source projects. Sometimes they don't glue in very well together. If you take a look at the CodeMirror component that I brought in, the component will receive props function has a debounce around it, which means that if it happens a number of times consecutively, it will only fire the last time. And the reason why that's a problem for us is because when we change one of these drop-downs, that updates the redux-form state, and that triggers a re-render of everything that depends on the redux-form state. But there is a way to fix this by using a method in the React component lifecycle called shouldComponentUpdate. And that will be passed next props, which is the next set of properties that are going to be passed into this component. So we can return false if none of the properties that we care about have changed. So we only have 2 props. We have this.props.text. So if that's not equal to next props, then we aren't going to re-render. Sorry, if that's not equal and if the language is also not equal. Forgot my or there. That should fix it if we did everything correctly. Now the top one changes color as expected, and the bottom one still does as well. And I can add a snippet of Ruby. And everything's working great. So now one more thing I want to do before we close it up is add Markdown. And fortunately, I don't have to install any new packages for that because react-codemirror handles Markdown. But rather than using this snippet component, I'm going to create a new component to do the Markdown because I don't want a drop-down that lets me change the language. I just want it to be Markdown. So I'll create the file that I need. And it's so similar to the snippet that I'm going to start by just copying everything. I'm going to delete what I don't need. I only need one mode, and that's Markdown. I can get rid of the others. I no longer have a language that I care about, so I no longer have a change handler for that language. I'm going to keep this function, but I'm going to disregard the language since I no longer have one. And of course, we no longer need this select, and as a mode, we know that we'll always be using Markdown. So let's save our file. And I forgot to rename it. Rename the component. So we'll have to import it up here if we're going to use it in our form. And also I can obviously no longer assume that I'm going to be rendering a snippet. I have more things than that now. So what I want to do is to make this as easy and dynamic as possible. So I'm going to define a dictionary of sorts. It's just a JSON object called components. And it maps from format to component type. So if my format is a snippet, then my component is a snippet. And if my format is Markdown, then so is my component. Therefore, in my blocks map here, I can declare that my component is equal to components b.format.value. That should give me the right component that I need. And then, instead of rendering snippet, I would render component. Let's make sure that still works. And it does. So now, in addition to that, I'm going to need a button. So you'll recall I have this add snippet button. I'm going to need an add markdown button too. So first let's add a function that will take care of it. This will be called add markdown, and I'm still adding array value to my post form. It's still going to my blocks array, but this time the format that we're using is Markdown, and of course we don't care about the language at all. So now that that function exists, we should be able to add a button for it. So instead of adding a snippet, we call the add markdown function. Let's see if it works. Click the add markdown, and I can add italic and bold text. Thanks a lot for joining us today. Please come back for our next video where we will be filling this stuff out a little bit more, adding more types of content blocks, and adding preview functionality to our blog.